Europe is preparing for not one, but two cold winters. Hi there, everyone. I'm Jeff, and this is Plain English, where JR and I help you upgrade your English with current events and trending topics. By listening right here, you'll get exposure to a lot of words and concepts in English. You'll learn expressions and phrasal verbs. And if you join us at plainenglish.com, you'll find lots of other ways to improve your skills in English, and a lot of it is free. Coming up today, it's getting cold in the Northern Hemisphere as winter approaches, and this is going to be a tough winter in Europe. That's because a lot of the natural gas that heats homes and powers factories has typically come from Russia. But now, with the war and sanctions, Europe is scrambling to replace that gas, and it's not easy. In the second half of today's lesson, I'll show you how to use the phrasal verb run on in the context of power and energy. And I have a quote of the week for you. Actually, I borrowed this quote from a Plain English Plus member. So let's get into it. At the beginning of 2022, things were looking bleak for the price of energy worldwide. The price of oil was high, and consumers were feeling it at the gas pump. But arguably, a bigger shock was happening in the natural gas market. As governments lifted COVID-19 restrictions and as the economy rebounded, a lot more natural gas was needed all at once. Natural gas does three things. It powers factories, it heats homes and offices, and, importantly, it generates electricity. And all three of those things were in high demand as the world economy rebounded. Prices were high, but they seemed manageable. But then, Russia invaded Ukraine. Europe imposed sharp sanctions on Russia, and everything changed. That's because Russia is the biggest supplier of natural gas to Europe. Winter is peak season for natural gas usage. During the summer months, imported gas is stored. During winter, those stores are drawn down. When the invasion hit in March, peak season was just ending, and Europe avoided a shock crisis in the middle of winter. But now it's getting cold again, and the situation has gotten worse. Europe implemented a blanket ban on imports of Russian oil. But for all the sanctions it has imposed on Vladimir Putin and his government, Europe still relies on Russia for natural gas imports. Those imports have slowed down, but it hasn't been easy. Europe is scrambling to find out how to survive the upcoming winter. The continent is still importing gas from Russia, but at a much lower rate. But Europe needs to be prepared for Russia to cut off gas supplies entirely. There are 4 strategies for doing this. None of them is pleasant. The first strategy is to import more liquefied natural gas. Oil is a convenient commodity because it can be shipped on a boat, on a train, on a truck, or through a pipeline. Natural gas is different. It typically arrives through pipelines, and those pipelines don't go everywhere. So if Germany and Poland are cut off from Russian gas, they can't easily turn around and buy it from somewhere else. Unless, that is, they import liquefied natural gas. Gas can be liquefied where it's produced, then shipped by sea, and then converted back into gas at its destination. But it's not easy to quickly build regasification stations. Many of Europe's regasification stations are in the West, in Britain and Spain, for example, but that's not where Russian gas needs to be replaced. So to get the imported gas to Poland and Germany, where it's needed, the gas has to go through a pipeline across the Pyrenees Mountains. But guess what? There isn't a lot of pipeline capacity to move all the gas east where it's needed. Poland and Germany, therefore, are scrambling to build more regasification capacity themselves, but it won't come online for years. In the meantime, they're planning to use some portable regasification facilities which are floating and can be installed in ports. Liquefied natural gas imports will help, but they won't fully replace the expected loss in Russian gas. Another option is to produce electricity using fuel other than natural gas. Here again, the options are limited. Electricity can be generated with coal, which is dirty and accelerates climate change. Through gritted teeth, Germany and the Netherlands have allowed more electricity to be produced with coal. Several European countries had plans to phase out their nuclear power stations. France is extending the life of a few nuclear power plants to boost its own electricity production. What about renewables? Europe's plan in the medium term is to increase renewable energy and eventually phase out Russian gas imports. But that's not yet possible. Last year saw lower than usual wind energy production, and other renewable sources are not yet fulsome enough to make a big difference. There are two more strategies to deal with the coming winter: demand reduction and rationing. The biggest reduction in demand will come from industrial users of natural gas. Germany's big industrial firms are considering ways to reduce their usage of natural gas. Some factories can be retrofit to run on oil instead of natural gas. While oil is more polluting, it's also more stable in the current economic environment. Another option is to simply reduce output. Governments will be working with industry and households to promote voluntary measures to reduce demand. The Eiffel Tower will be dark at night in a nod to conservation. Office landlords will lower the heat in their office blocks by a few degrees. Households will be encouraged to do the same. Expect demand for sweaters and blankets to increase. Voluntary measures can only do so much. So that brings us to rationing, a word European politicians are reluctant to use. But the EU is proposing mandatory caps on energy consumption during certain peak hours over the winter. No politician wants to be the first to use the R word, rationing, until it's absolutely necessary, but it's already late October. I'll close with 2 pieces of good news and 1 piece of bad news. The good news is that Europe's natural gas storage is up to about 80% of its capacity, which is higher than anyone thought possible back at the beginning of the war. And the other good thing is that the continent is now getting just 9% of its gas from Russia, down from over half before the war. So a lot of the painful transition has already happened. The bad news, though, is that every single factor driving up prices this year will also apply next year. New capacity to import liquefied natural gas takes a long time to build. Pipelines take even longer to develop. A huge mountain range crosses the middle of Europe. It's not easy to build a pipeline across that. Energy analysts think that Europe is facing 2 years of gas shortages before the market stabilizes. I hate to add even more bad news, but just a few weeks ago, the major pipeline connecting Russia to Europe started leaking. It was under the water in the Baltic Sea. And it's almost certain that this was sabotage of some kind, almost definitely from Russia. So this raises a frightening prospect. Imagine Russia stops selling all gas to Europe. That's bad. But then imagine Russia decides to target the undersea pipelines that connect, say, Norway to mainland Europe. Russia has already proven that it can sabotage a pipeline and cause a major leak. There's nothing stopping it from doing the same to the other pipelines that supply Europe in the same neighborhood. This is just a case of extraordinarily bad timing. Europe's hope over the last decade was that it could phase out coal and phase out nuclear power. Eventually, it could replace all that with green technologies, wind, solar, hydrogen. But that left a gap of a few decades. And Europe decided it could fill that gap with natural gas, and the cheapest place to get that gas was from Russia. It was never going to be a forever solution, they thought, but it would be a 10 or 20-year solution until renewables really developed. But right here in the gap, Russia invaded Ukraine, and that changed everything. Today's English expression is a phrasal verb, run on. We use this in a very specific situation, which is when we're talking about the fuel or power source of a device or a process. Toys are a great example, and here's a really common thing to say about toys. It runs on batteries. It runs on batteries means it's powered by batteries. Batteries supply the power for the toy. I remember a few toys that ran on batteries. One was called Light Bright. It was a tablet-shaped toy with lots of colors, and you could kind of draw your own art on it. A Light Bright runs on batteries. If you say a toy runs on batteries, you're clarifying that you don't have to plug it into the wall. The power source is batteries. Here's another toy that runs on batteries. Simon. Did you have one of those? It was like a multicolored wheel, and I think it was something about patterns. Like it would show a pattern of buttons to press, and you had to press the buttons in the same pattern. I know. It's nothing compared to today's toys, but it was basically indestructible, and it ran on batteries. If you have a big house, and if you live in a cold climate, you might consider getting a space heater. You can use a space heater to warm up just a small room or part of your house instead of turning your thermostat up. A space heater runs on electricity. So if electricity is cheaper than gas, you could save money that way too. A space heater runs on electricity. The power source is electricity. Let's think on a bigger scale now. Germany is an industrial powerhouse in Europe. Its factories consume a lot of energy. And there's an energy crunch right now, especially in natural gas. BASF is one of the world's largest chemical companies. A lot of BASF factories run on natural gas. Faced with higher prices and possible rationing, BASF is considering retrofitting its factories. The company wants more of its factories to run on oil. Why would it be better for the factories to run on oil than on gas? Well, because now the supply of gas is at risk. It's very volatile. Oil, at least these days, is much more stable and more secure. By the way, there's a sentence I never thought I'd utter. Oil is the most secure fuel source. How times change. A lot of homes in the Northeast of the United States have generators. A generator is like a mini electrical plant that you keep in your garage for emergencies. We had one in my house growing up. So what happens is, in a big storm, whether it's a snowstorm or a hurricane, you might lose power for hours or even days at a time. If you lose power, you can't run your furnace, your refrigerator, your stove, anything. So a lot of homes have a generator that can produce a small amount of electricity in an emergency. The generators run on gasoline, just like what you can get at the gas station. So if a storm is coming, you'll go to the gas station, fill up a few portable tanks, and hope you don't have to use them. But the generators are a backup fuel source and they run on gasoline. Most hospitals around the world have backup generators like this too to maintain the critical machinery keeping patients alive. In the Plain English Plus membership, we have a few ways for you to practice writing, and one of those ways is a writing prompt every week. It's a question of the week for you to answer in your own words. And our friend JR is the one in charge of the question. He does not ask for my approval first. He just publishes the question, so I have no idea what they're going to be before they're published, usually on Saturdays. Well, last week, his question to Plus members was this: do you have a favorite quote? And one of the members, Estefan from Taiwan, who you saw in the 500th lesson video, Estefan shared this quote: "A contented mind is the greatest blessing a man can enjoy in this world." That was from Joseph Addison. He was an English writer and politician. He lived in the 16 and 1700s. That's a long time ago. But I would argue that his ideas have stood the test of time. Even now, in 2022, I think this quote is a good one. A contented mind is the greatest blessing a man can enjoy in this world. And that is all for today, Monday, October 24th, 2022. Congratulations on making it to the end of another lesson. Earlier, I mentioned the chances to practice writing with us at Plain English Plus. JR's question of the week is just one such opportunity. So if you're looking to be a little more active with your Plain English learning, I invite you to come join us in Plain English Plus by visiting plainenglish.com/plus, Plus. We'll be back on Thursday with another lesson. Thursday's lesson is about asteroids destroying the Earth. Wait, no, that's not the topic. It's about avoiding the prospect of asteroids destroying the Earth. And it's a good one. So make sure to join us on Thursday. See you then.